Nice to nice to see such a big attendance at such an early hour. Uh, I will do my best to keep a coherent presentation, kind of early. Also, a lot of familiar faces, people I respect deeply. So I guess the stage fright is a little bit bigger because of that, even. So, um, what I'm going to talk today about is personal data, privacy, and ethics in a decentralized world. And it's the intent of this presentation is actually not to provide any answers. Hopefully, the result of this talk will be that you have more questions. Um, yeah, let's start. First, a little bit of a context. My name is Gregor. I'm one of the co-founders of Data Fund project. Data Fund is a protocol that guards personal data and provides safe storage and enables data exchange, personal data exchange. So information is shared on a need-to-know basis, and at the same time we try to incentivize the sharing of anonymous data. During the talk I will try to maybe also draw some parallels about the challenges that we face. So it's also considering the time frame, we will just glance over some topics because actually personal data, privacy, and ethics are topics that could deserve each of these topics could deserve its own conference. So, what is personal data? First, just a quick definition. Personal data we see as any kind of data that can reveal individual's identity. And here we also need to take into account that sometimes we have anonymous data streams, but when those anonymous data streams are combined, they can lead to identity revelation, and in that sense, they also become, again, personal data. And why is personal data important? It's because we live in a data-driven society, and this data-driven society is fueled by personal data. Personal data actually is responsible for Brexit and Trump, among others. We wouldn't think about it on the first thought, but when we look at the behind, at what happened in backstage, how people were targeted with ads and messages that are designed to elicit emotional responses, and it's within the, let's say, personal data community, it's quite clear that those were the factors that move the needle. So, so we have this is an example of one type of research. This researcher specifically who did this actually made a public complaint that his research was abused by a company called Cambridge Analytica, and Cambridge Analytica's biggest clients in 2016 were, yes, Brexit and Trump. And in this sense, hyper-targeted ads do change our beliefs and attitudes, and what is most important, without our awareness. And this is one of the keys I think that we need to recognize in today's time, that there's a lot of activities happening that we are actually not aware of because they're already so sophisticated. So in that sense, our online actions, without us noticing, reveal our personality profiles. And at the same time, what we need to consider is that our offline actions are actually influenced by online activities. And the person who knows your personality can actually devise systems, they can devise activities that influence you without you being aware. And here what we need to think about is actually, in the sense also, some research indicates that 50%, almost 50% of our daily decisions are decisions that we're not aware of. And this ranges from simple things like that we don't think which shoe we put on first to complex things like relationships. Sometimes we react in relationships and then later we ask ourselves, why did we do that? This is all basically the works of the brain. And it has to be like this, because this is actually what gives us human a competitive advantage against other species. But yes, the brain does not distinguish between bad and good habits. And personality modeling and insights, it's becoming a big business. It's actually, you can go online, you can do demos, you can try out. Already like a couple of years ago, IBM needed around 200 tweets to break down your personality in more than 40 traits. So your personality profile is out there. And you can also then imagine, what does this mean? IBM and other companies are offering this to the enterprise sector. You call customer support, and you know, with that customer support, it just makes click. And it's like, wow, they're so cool guys, I'm going to buy more. So this is one aspect. We're only going to touch on a couple of them. And the other very important aspect is that physical and virtual worlds have merged. And simple example would be how we can see today that, I don't know, a lot of people go to a concert not to listen to music, but to make a photo and to collect likes. So it's again, the virtual is influencing the physical and vice versa. And in this context, personal data is becoming the digital extension of us, the digital self. Therefore, a shared photo is actually a lot more than a photo. It's experts look from colors to composition to time when it was posted to the content. It's like a photo really tells more than 1,000 words. And now let's think about an Instagram stream. Let's think about all the other social media streams, all the likes, how much they reveal. And then if we combine this with personality modeling, it becomes a little bit worrisome. Another thing is we create these data streams, and we see a trend. Just a question, how many of you have heard of the social credit system in China? Wow, that's why I like this crowd. So usually I'm the only one knowing this. And yeah, in summary, what's happening there is social credit score system in China is kind of like a credit score, just that it uses a lot more data sources, drawing from social media, our online behavior in general, and so forth. And it's not just used for deciding if a person is entitled to a loan or not. It's at the moment the system is being tested and there are only rewards. So if your behavior is aligned with the guidelines and directives of the Communist Party in China, then your score goes up. If it's not, it goes down. And it's going to be mandatory in 2020. And in 2020, China is also going to introduce punishments. So what does this mean? If your credit score is low, parents won't be able to send kids to the best schools, to the schools they want. You will have more, Chinese people will have more difficulties to get visa, to travel. Some of them won't be able to book better flights, and so forth. And it gets even crazier. It's like if your friends have a low social score, then you get punished also. And now let's let this sink in, you know. So in that sense, it's not meant in a positive way, but it's actually a breakthrough. It's until now, usually the authorities, the governments, the kings, and so forth had like really obvious means of repression and controlling the society. You know, it's like this guy, he's not cool, he's a traitor, we shoot him. Okay, it's like very obvious and not really pleasant for people to see. Here, what we have is your data streams are creating a gamified experience of coercion. And people actually like it. That's also the crazy thing. So maybe yeah, today China, tomorrow the world. And in this sense, we at Data Fund we deeply believe that in the digital age, freedom actually starts with owning your data. And moreover, like I said before, it's about the digital extension of ourselves, so a little bit food for thought. Is the new spirit actually the data? So, therefore, I think it's quite obvious, and also considering the audience here, I don't think I need to make a big case why privacy matters. For me, it was important to highlight more. Usually, a lot of times there's a talk, I don't have anything to hide, what does NSA want from me, and so forth. And yeah, this is not, maybe for people, everyday people, this is not the main concern. In this sense, I really like the quote from Edward Snowden, who also says that people who usually say, I don't care about privacy because I don't have anything to hide, it's kind of the same as saying, I don't care about freedom of speech because I don't have anything to say. And again, I hope that the previous examples showed that it's not, in essence, it's not about hiding something that would be illegal. It's just being prudent and safeguarding things that shouldn't be exposing you to malicious actors. It's like we take care of our private keys, we lock the doors of our homes, but we actually leave our minds wide open. And in this sense, it's privacy is actually not just a technological challenge. We see great progress in cryptography, in new tools, in projects that are being presented here, but it's also a social challenge. This is one thing that we noticed also during our work. When we started the project, we were like, yeah, privacy, everybody is going to be up for privacy and things like that. And no, people just don't care. They don't care because it's on one side, it really doesn't hurt us if we it really doesn't hurt us if our data gets leaked, if it's copied and so on, and it's also very abstract theme. And if I come back to the point where I said like the physical and the virtual worlds have merged, so at the same time when we look at personal data and how it's being treated and managed, it's like a really big discrepancy of what's going on. So if I give like a metaphor, you know, like trying to, let's illustrate some online behavior in the physical world. Imagine you're on a romantic date, you speak, you're like engaged in a conversation, it goes well, and there comes like this one guy, and with Facebook written on the t-shirt, and without asking, sits next to you and says like, hey guys, just keep continuing with your date, do not mind me, I will make some notes, so I know later better what to sell to you. Well, you know, if that would happen in the real world, you would be like, whoa, hey dude, chill. So there was, I also discussed this recently with a friend, and his argument was that maybe it's just this human element that makes it awkward. Maybe if there would be Alexa on the table, the couple would still have like a nice romantic dinner and everything. And yes, it's true, but at the same time, I think we need to look at it as more an illustration how also technology can sometimes hide important things, how technology can make us less aware that personal data matters. And it's actually that guy who would be writing down notes wouldn't take so many notes as Alexa. So in this sense, what we strive at Data Fund is to encourage that people start thinking about minimized sharing of personal data, share on the need-to-know basis, engage in a meaningful exchange, while at the same time, we shouldn't really be closed also in this paranoia. We should be proactive and think about how anonymous data can create big data sets that improve the quality of life, that make research faster, that enable things we couldn't imagine before. Now, in the sense about privacy, there's also one good news in Europe. It's an upcoming law called GDPR. I'm not really going to talk much about law. This is not definitely not my domain. But the important thing is individuals will need to give consents for any use of data. Companies or organizations in general risk of getting really high fines if they don't respect this. And at the same time, individuals will be able to demand export or deletion of their data. The law comes in effect in about 3 months. The importance for us here is that it changes the dynamic. It's like if you look this personal data stream or life cycle, it's kind of from a game theoretic perspective, it's introducing a punishment, and this is changing some relations, and this is important for us. So, in this sense, I would just move to the last section. Here comes the ethics in play, and what do I mean with this? It's there are a lot of questions. We could have now here, for example, a debate. We could start with privacy, yes or no, and there would be arguments, good arguments, why there shouldn't be privacy. We could basically, both sides can have good points, and ethics, in this sense, it's something that fosters discussion, and in essence, it's about inventing good and bad. So, at its simplest, ethics is a system of moral principles. It affects people's decisions and how we lead our lives. Moreover, what is important, and I think this is important for us as Data Fund, for wider ecosystem of developers and blockchain community in general, ethics can provide a moral map. What is meant by this? It's like usually ethical discussions are the ones that are really passionate, because the moral dilemmas, you know, when we look at pro-life discussions or against and so forth, and when it's so heated discussions, when we see them, and when emotions come in play, cognitive biases get stronger. It's like the rationality gets a little bit sidelined, and in that moment, a set of guidelines, ethical guidelines, can step in and say, look, this is your checklist. This is your reality check. Moreover, it's a structured approach. So in this sense, ethics can also pinpoint where the disagreement is. And this you can see also in everyday life. You know, when a Reddit discussion goes sour, it starts so promising, there's so much good talk, and then it just degrades. And this is because then, you know, some people come with totally something that's out of the scope, and then the others start arguing, we're not talking about that and stuff like that. So here come again ethics frameworks in place. What we need to do, what we need to be aware is ethics doesn't really give right answers. It's about discussion. And that's why I also said at the beginning that today I hope I facilitate more questions than answers. And sometimes it can also give several answers. For us, in the blockchain space, it's also important because it's like, how many of you have written a business plan in the past? So a couple. And yeah, it's kind of a tedious job, you know. It's like I haven't actually really met somebody who would come to me with an excitement, hey man, I'm working on a business plan. But what a business plan forces you is to think about aspects that you would neglect else. And the same is with ethics. It makes us think the uncomfortable things. And in this sense, it also helps us to maybe recognize what are possible unintended side effects. And again, I don't think I need to stress how important that is if you build unstoppable applications. So, in that sense, ethics is in essence a social consensus. So if we talk a lot about consensus on the tech level, I do think that with the dawn of new applications that include the social layer, we also need to define what's actually the social consensus, what's the world we want to build. Some issues that, and this list is by no means like a complete list, it's just, again, to foster discussion. So some issues that we see specifically with ethics on blockchain is incentives. How do incentives drive behavior? We also see a lot of times, in a sense, it's like, you know, today the world is getting tokenized. And maybe it would help if some of the projects would step back and actually think about, are we merging two things that should be merged or not? Matchmaking app that is incentivized with tokens can quickly turn you basically into a pimp. I mean, it's a very thin line. So I'm incentivized to really connect with many other people. And there are like a lot of other problems. For us, it was the question, in essence, creating a personal data marketplace. If you just go down the basic route, you know, you have the buy side, you have the sell side, you match. Is this really the way we want to go? And having such a market, does this expose an individual? Does this long-term create more damage to the individual than not? And these are important questions to think about. Then another question is like persistence of data. We are often asked like, do you save data on blockchain? No, we're not going to save data on blockchain. We're going to save it in a really awesome system called Swarm that Victor is presenting a little bit later. Then we are at the dawn of merging blockchain and AI. AI already has its own issues with ethics. So it's a already big field, and this just increases the complexity. Then again, it's like if I deploy a smart contract, and that smart contract turns out to, even it was meant to don't be evil, that it becomes evil, who's responsible for that? So it's a lot of open questions. And because of that, as Data Fund, we've been facing this and talking about it as a team. But we feel, and we are very happy that there's already a lot of projects that feel the same, that this is something that needs a wider discussion. Because why? It's like, you know, if you do your own ethics, it's without talking, without hearing other people's views, without having the right diversity. What we're doing is just then incorporating our own biases into our internal ethics charter that actually just strengthens our own echo chamber. And we might think like, ooh, we are doing a good job, but our reality might be totally displaced. And moreover, it's this discussion should actually not just happen within the blockchain space, because also, you know, when you speak with the normies, you also become aware that blockchain space is an echo chamber of its own. So we should involve other parties as well. And for this reason, we are now in the process of announcing and creating its working name, Ethics on Blockchain Initiative. It's open for all teams that are concerned about these questions. And we are going to also, we are in the talks with outside third-party experts, ethics experts, to engage with the blockchain community. And expect more news about this coming out later this month. And if anybody is interested, wants to talk more, please do look us up. We'll be here for the whole week. And we also have a booth and data fund, and just come there and let's talk more and let's invent something good. Thank you. Any? Well, I think it's a process. In essence, it's a process. Also, I believe nobody can now provide like 100% bulletproof solution, and that's why I also spoke before about the awareness. It's that part is happening. It started to happen a lot more faster with the revelations from Snowden. Every security breach, the cases of identity theft, the discussion now in the United States about interfering in the elections, all these events help with a bigger awareness. At the same time, this awareness also brings in awareness how already today our personal data is being used, how it's being monetized, and actually everybody's earning money on your data except you. So this element of, let's say, greed also in a kind of controlled setting, I think it's also going to be helpful.
TV series?
Sorry, I don't hear.
That there's a TV series, The Orville. Have you seen it? The Orville.
The Orville show.
Yes.
Yes.
Have you seen the episode that basically gives us a blink on what happens when China implements that social rating system?
No.
You should
No.
see it because everybody had that badge on them where they get up and down voted.
Must be one of the latest episodes.
Yeah, but it
Yeah, I will check it out.
When I saw that China thing, it was like, didn't they watch The Orville in China? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. This is actually a really good point because things now are not happening in an obvious way. It's like also through TV shows, we're getting more used. It's like just think about like a simple case. I don't know how many years it's now, like 7 or 10 years, when Google introduced Find My Friends feature. There was like this whole outrage how our privacy is being compromised, and basically they removed it, and a couple of years later they renamed it, and today it's kind of a good utility. And I think not necessarily saying that this is good or bad, it's just important that we are aware of these things.
Thank you for the talk, Gregor. Talked about ethics being a form of social consensus. And in the context of blockchain, I was just wondering, given that there are sort of a lot of different schools of thought around ethics, so whether that's utilitarianism or people who are maybe religious and have sort of a rule-based view on ethics, how do you, if a blockchain is going to bake the ethics into the protocol in some fixed fashion, how do you kind of represent the fluidity that humans approach ethics with?
Thank you, very good question. Maybe first, personally, I'm not an advocate that we include ethics on the blockchain, on the protocol level. So this is also, it's a very good discussion when we look at, before when I mentioned, okay, we have in blockchain, we have the consensus on the technical level, and if ethics is the consensus on the social level. So maybe this is actually a question of product design. It's a question of teams to think about what do their incentives do. It's a question of user experience. In our case, just, it's like we want to enable individuals to store their data. But should we make it easy to share their EEG data or their DNA? Should there be also some UX safeguards? Because at the same time, I deeply believe, it's like that the protocol itself needs to be neutral. And again, if ethics is a part, if you look at it as a social consensus, then some things within one network might not necessarily hold true for the other. But if we have like a set of guidelines, it's also easier for the community to have a look like and to evaluate it for themselves. To say it would be akin to maybe a summary of a political program and where you decide which party you're going to vote for on elections. So ethics, yes, definitely. It's a fluid process. It's maybe some things that we agree on today will change in the future and so. Yeah, very good. Ethics by design. Yeah, I agree. Here was a remark about ethics by design, and yes, this is a very important point because what we also see often is, and I've been, for example, just yesterday before this talk here, I was checking like ethics charters from various big time organizations that we engage every day, and it's more or less just fluffy talk, you know. So it's not point of ethics just to bolt it on once you have it done and find somebody who would agree with you on all the points. It's about from the beginning, before you write your first line of code, to have this awareness why you do certain things. I guess that's it. Thank you.
Oh, it's a
Try
bit.
to have it closer on outside so that they can hear.
Okay. Can you guys hear me? Okay, good. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. So I encourage the audience to come a bit like down, because there's a lot of spaces here, and maybe it's better if you don't make a crowd at the entrance. So today I would like to give a bit of an update on Swarm, and at the same time bring you a view on Swarm in terms of a toolkit that we provide as a set of base layer infrastructure services for the long coveted decentralized web that we termed Web 3. So Web 3 is this kind of idealized third stage of the internet, when we go back to the old ideas of having decentralized services instead of the Facebooks and Googles of today, which is kind of a vision or bit of a dream. So what is Swarm? Originally, the scope of Swarm was to provide a data layer and like storage service and content distribution layer to the Ethereum ecosystem. So from very early on, like the Ethereum founders realized that the blockchain, public blockchain, is the final missing piece of the puzzle in the decentralized web. Because basically, with the public blockchain and smart contracts, during complete smart contracts, you can program incentive systems, which a lot of quite advanced peer-to-peer technologies needed to become self-sustaining. So to add economic incentive systems to make these services self-sustaining. So what is Swarm? Swarm is basically an incentivized peer-to-peer web. It provides integrity protection, fault-tolerant and censorship-resistant storage, and it's a genuine cloud service in the sense that so from a distance, like Swarm looks like BitTorrent on steroids, and maybe it's the easy way to explain to your friends what it is. However, if you look closer, it's not of a family of file sharing systems in the way as like others like IPFS and the others are. It's a genuine cloud service in the sense that you can genuinely upload content to it, and Swarm is very opinionated about where certain content is stored. It's not that you open up your hard drive and you become seeder of a content that you already have. So what happens is that when you put up a document on Swarm, it's chunked into little pieces, and the little pieces, based on their content address or fingerprint, travel to areas of the network, to nodes which are closer to the content address of the chunk. So it's basically distributing chunks based on their address, and the address lives in the same address space as the individual nodes that form the decentralized distributed storage network. Okay, so what it gets us immediately is that because we use content hashes as content addresses, we immediately have like an automatic load balancing on the content, and we have integrity protection because the content addressing makes sure that the content is immutable. So if you have a hash that you know someone intended to show you a content with, then you can be sure that it's exactly what they wanted to show you. So there's no more hacking of websites in this paradigm. Now, one important thing is that how you map it to real world memorable names. So you use the ENS, the Ethereum name service for domain name resolution, and Swarm supports URL based lookup. How does it work? You basically look up the domain name, which maps to a hash that contains a kind of a special data structure, which maps paths to hashes, to basically maps URL paths to documents, and therefore you can access document collections. This renders Swarm basically able to provide serverless hosting of whole websites, because with these manifests you can basically create a sitemap and access the individual documents on a site. So it's basically a serverless web hosting environment with integrity protection, censorship resistance, and fault tolerance. So this is the basic introduction to Swarm. A bit of update. So last week we were fortunate to be hosted by the Research of Institute for Art and Technology in Vienna for our Hack Week, where we managed to round off the sprint for the very first POC 3 release, which is going to come out soon. This is going to bring major network resilience improvements and some other features. I'm happy to say that the Swarm team has extended substantially in the recent past, so our team is on fire and we're delivering new features. We have working relationships and working groups, collaborations with some companies. Notably, I would pick Status, Mainframe, Walk, LivePeer, and Data Fund, who are supporting us and working with us on various aspects of the Swarm. So, what am I going to talk about today? So basically in Shanghai was the first time when I kind of introduced a bit of a wider scope for Swarm as being a toolkit for infrastructure, like base layer infrastructure services for the web. And that's where I first talked about PSS, our decentralized messaging service for real life communication, which uses the same network protocol and routing as basically as what it is responsible for chunk distribution and request handling in the Swarm network. We also talked about how the manifest idea, so basically indexing certain keys to content, can be easily extended to handle various database related data structures, and therefore it can serve as a database layer for Web3. This is kind of important for the mass adoption of these decentralized services, because it helps developers to carry over and migrate some of the knowledge that already exists with Web2. So in the current common method to build the real-time interactive web applications is to use is more and more common to use client-side rendering and most of the not so heavy computation, but most websites have a database backend which the client-side renderer communicates with through an API, and usually that database is still sitting on some server. If we want to move on to a completely serverless solution, then we have to provide decentralized database services, and this is exactly what we were working on with the help of Walk, a US company. And this will pave the way to finally put the blockchain and Ethereum state data on Swarm as well, to help the diversity of light clients. So, what I would like to talk about is so in Shanghai and some previous talks, I already introduced some of these components and told you about how these components kind of as solutions to various infrastructure service problems kind of fell out of the design of Swarm, and some of this we kind of hit upon serendipitously. And today I would like to take a totally different approach and take a top-down approach and take you on a kind of imaginary journey, not so technical, in which I kind of lay out a typical use case, a rather banal use case of how we use the internet and digital services currently for a particular scenario. And I would like to comment on what components we use today and how these infrastructure services that we're building, we have built or we are in the process of building on Swarm, can contribute to replace and substitute these solutions. So let me talk a little bit about these components, but first let me set the context. So let's imagine that in a typical day, what you do, you come up with an idea that a group of friends wants to organize an event. The event is like a panel discussion, say, about ethics on the blockchain, and there's a group of friends who organize this, but ultimately want the panel discussion to be broadcast live. So what kind of stages there are in this process? Well, normally you would start some sort of chat group among these friends who are interested in organizing these events. You would probably use Skype or whatever group chat that you typically use, like Slack. And then you would start editing a document using your Google Drive or Dropbox. You would share something, and then you would do collaborative editing tools to edit, say the web page that you're going to put up as the public face of this event. You would then use some sort of server to put up this content. You would use the usual way to associate a domain name with the current version by adding the name service to your domain name host, and in a later stage, you would probably how would you create an event? You would probably go to Facebook, create a Facebook event, and therefore make it searchable. And then when it comes to the event, you probably would use Google Hangouts, or some sort of Google service where you would do the same. So what tools are available that would help us replace these solutions? Well, first of all, you could use PSS, the PSS messaging, to organize the chat in the group. PSS allows for encrypted messaging and provides group chat. There's already a product developed by Mainframe called, I think the current name is Onyx. It's an alpha product which basically implements a Slack using PSS. This will obviously be only production operational once we have POC release out, and probably really reliable only when we have the production version of Swarm out. So this looks like, so sorry about that, this looks something like this. So what are the components that we might want to use? So when you share your document, you could use instead of Dropbox, you could use the Fuse extension of Swarm, which is basically constitutes the backend for a Dropbox application. So what is Fuse? Fuse is file system in user space. It's a file system driver that allows the extension of operating system kernels to handle to write arbitrary file system drivers. What does it mean? We already have this implemented. It's been working for half a year. So you basically can mount a Swarm site or manifest as a file system on your local hard drive, which means that you could if you upload a directory and mount it as a local file system, you can write into it, and it behaves exactly like a Dropbox directory. Now, with using a hierarchical access control encryption, you can basically share. You can have the possibility to share the directory. So share one of your Dropbox directories as public, or share it with a select number of people that you want to share it with. So it's exactly this feature that we like to use in Dropbox or Google Drive, and so the infrastructure is there already in Swarm to do that. The encryption part is currently being developed. There's a talk by Donny on Friday that details our solution for access control and encryption in general. So what else is needed for co-ed, for shared access content? Well, if you want to update your content from different devices or by different people, you probably need to update the changing mutable hash on the Ethereum name service. We also have another solution which allows for more frequent and cheaper updates to mutable resources. It's called Mutable Resource Update, or MER. And there's going to be a talk by Louis Holbrook on Saturday, which details this solution. I'm not going to the technical details now. But the point is that with this kind of resource updates, nodes have a way to check the particular versions of a mutable resource in the same way as they would be the ENS, with the difference that they don't need to be necessarily synchronized with the blockchain. They don't need to. They only need to retrieve particular chunks and data from Swarm to know what the current state of a mutable resource is. And most notably, to make an update, you just need to upload things to Swarm, and you don't need to send a transaction to the blockchain. But you can. That's also important, that any such resource update, which is obviously contains a signed, it contains a signature from the resource owner. It can be sent to the blockchain, to ENS, to consolidate the current state. So and then it can be sent by any third party. So let's move on to our imaginary scenario. What happens when we actually want to collaboratively edit a document? Let's say we are a bunch of geeks and we actually want to co-edit the HTML page that will advertise our event. So what do? There's an interesting feature of PSS, which allows not only like unstructured communication like chat, but it actually allows PSS, the PSS messaging allows for you to mount dev peer-to-peer protocol, an actual structured protocol over this encrypted remote communication, which means that, for example, you can use the decentralized version of the Google algorithm that handles real-time co-editing of documents. You can mount that protocol over PSS, and you immediately have a DApp, serverless DApp, which allows you to co-edit stuff. And you can have some sort of rule set which determines who's updating the current version on the resource update or the ENS, and that way kind of make a kind of poor man's version of consensus over where you are in the what's the most current version. of course, real consensus over this is only achieved when the hash is registered on ENS on the blockchain. I mentioned that the next step would be to actually create an event. So in our group, we decided that to have this panel discussion about ethics and the blockchain. So what would you do normally? You would create a Facebook event. In this case, what we can do is to use a decentralized database creation where we can create an entry for this particular event, therefore make it immediately searchable and indexable by venue and by time. It's all in the decentralized fashion, using this SwarmDB extension. And when we get to the actual event, what would happen? We could use live peers media streaming solution for video conferencing, and also for public broadcast of the video streams. So these solutions are all either have been completed or in the making, and probably going to reach production ready state with the POC4 release in. I kind of predict that to be the first quarter of 2019 when all these components will become stable. So let's just recap what we have at the moment. We have the mutable resource updates implemented. We have PSS messaging implemented. We have the Fuse driver as the backend for Dropbox implemented. We are almost finished with the encryption implementation, and what we still have planned only for POC4 is the database component and the actual incentive layer for storage insurance. If you want to have more information about these actual components, then I encourage you to see some of the videos from DEF CON 3, because there's up a very good video about PSS, and is also about this mainframe application. There's a talk, there's a London meetup talk, an hour-long talk, which details the generalized incentive framework that we're using, that we playfully termed swap, swear, and swindle games. These are basically generalizing the a framework in which you can program incentives and have service contracts and collateralized commitments of any kind of networked service, and also have peer-to-peer accounting via the swap system. And it's basically our glorified variant of a state channel, these swap contracts, and they basically implement some payment channels to help scale micropayments and microaccounting that is needed for bandwidth incentivization, for example, and for some various other services. So these components, again, Fuse, PSS, swap, swear, and swindle, mutable resource updates, and swarm databases are forming a kind of starting to shape up as a nice toolkit for Web3 base layer infrastructure, and you can use these components as kind of Lego pieces to put together modularly high-level applications or high-level services, which can ultimately, in this dream world at least that I have, replace current solutions. For example, Facebook, Google Drive, and Dropbox, and Hangouts, etc. So consider that. And finally, I would like to mention that we have, based on last year's success of the Swarm Summit that we had in Berlin in June 2017, we're gonna have a new round. So this is gonna be kind of a mini conference and a few hack days. The Swarm Orange Summit one, which is going to be in Ljubljana. This is the second week of May. And if anyone is interested in presenting or having a workshop or giving a talk on any topic related to decentralized web, especially storage and messaging, then please submit your abstracts or just give us a shout that you want to participate. Thank you very much, and I'm opening up to questions now. Sorry, I was not very agile in handling the slides because I became a bit off my medication. So probably people in the audience know that I have Parkinson's, and sometimes I struggle with timing my medication for the talk. So it's a bit hard right now. So please, shall go ahead with questions. Yes. My cheeky answer is that no, and it shouldn't be anyway, because it's kind of a stupid legacy of a system where data was not globalized. There are kind of far-fetched solutions in which you can form you can have like a set of nodes that register and promise to hold their data in a particular location, and they somehow put that commitment or promise up on the blockchain. But even that is just kind of a positive promise that the data will be held there. There's no promise that other nodes outside that will not store it. So it's this is actually a very difficult problem to do on systems, or at least I don't know a solution. If you guys have any solution, then I'm happy to hear out. But in general, I don't think we want to support such geographical restrictions, because they are kind of even the concept is kind of alien to global distributed systems. Yes. Correct. 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 Thank you for the nice synopsis. It's exactly the problem. There's two pillars of incentivization in Swarm. One is for the smooth operation and of request handling. That is basically corresponds to rewarding nodes for their bandwidth contribution, and the other one is rewarding nodes for their storage, meaning that you have to compensate nodes for the missed opportunity to serve out popular content and get bandwidth incentives for them in favor of keeping your, I don't know, your birth certificate or some very private content that is typically not very popular or not retrieved very often. So for this kind of storage incentives, we use an insurance system, and that's going to be, so the question was when it's going to be implemented. So we had some prototype implementations. We have an article or a paper work in progress, which is called Swapware and Swindle Games, that describes this in a little bit more detail. And Ralph Pixler from Riyadh started re-implementing these contracts, and is going to have a lot of iterations, of course, and especially it has to be combined with the implementation of our proof of custody solution. And I expect that to be ready only for POC 4. So it's going to be part of the production release, and I think some early version is probably going to be in about half a year, and the time when you can expect like really resilient swarm and no data loss, that's basically only possible anyway, even if the incentive is implemented. It's only possible if it's actually backed by real Ethereum tokens. So when the swarm actually is going on the main net, yeah, because when the actual insurance system is properly paid with Ether or some other token, yeah. So that's when I expect resilient and lossless use of swarm, only in POC 4. This answer your question? Yes? Yes, we are in contact with them, sure, and we have been in contact with them from very early on. In fact, like they are kind of, we consider them as a sister project or even mother project, because they are kind of the Web3 hub of protocols. So we kind of have an agreement that swarm hashes will be available on IPFS. So they're going to be part of the registry in IPFS. The main difference between swarm and IPFS, if you look closer, kind of, there's two main differences. One that I mentioned before, that IPFS is kind of starting from the file sharing family of decentralized storage solutions, in the sense that you open up your hard drive with particular content and register that and publish that, register that content, and there's no genuine systematic way of distributing the chunks in a way that each chunk would have a specific space where it's supposed to be stored. In Swarm there is, and exactly for this reason, there's a genuine sense in which you can upload stuff to Swarm, even if you don't have any storage resources yourself. Now this has a lot of implications in terms of, because in this sense you kind of, as a Swarm node, you're forced to store other people's content. So we have to have measures of plausible deniability, which means that allowing tools for storers to deny that they know anything about the content of what they store. The other very important difference is that Filecoin, as far as I understand it, is providing positive incentivization only for miners, which might work out, but I have a strong suspicion that because it's basically socializes the risk of losing any particular file, practically this kind of losses will happen. Or if it doesn't happen, it's probably after the goodwill or lucky volume of available resources that it doesn't happen. There's no strong guarantees. In Swarm, we put a lot of effort into providing insurance solutions, which make the storers of particular chunks individually accountable, and therefore the threat of punitive measures is a strong disincentive against losing any particular chunk of file. I don't know if this answered the question. Any more questions? So go to Donny's talk about encryption and Luis's talk about mutable resource updates. Thank you very much.
So we'll have a 20-minute